Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. So, I wanted to talk about the three principles, but I wanted to talk about them by relating them to the three different ways that people talk about them in the world. So if you type the three principles into Google, chances are you'll see Sid Banks, who was the first person to articulate the principles. You'll probably see some stuff about me and people like George Pransky and Elsie Spittle and Jamie Smart. You may also see things that have nothing to do with the world of spiritual development. You might find three principles relating to color or flight or other fields. But generally speaking, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are interested in the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. And one of the things that you'll notice, if you start clicking on those links and reading what people have to say and watching videos, while everyone will be talking about the three principles, not everyone will be talking about them at the same level. And I found that it's kind of valuable to separate out the different levels that people talk about them at. Now, one level people talk about them at is the three principles as an approach. And I remember when I first started studying the principles, one of my teachers told me that it's impossible to give away what you don't have. And I thought, well, that's true. But he then went on to say, so if you're not already mentally healthy in yourself, you can't help other people to find health in themselves. Which I knew was patently untrue, because I came from a field where some of the top teachers and practitioners, myself included, had helped thousands of people to gain relief from suffering, and we were all still struggling with a whole bunch of well-being issues in ourselves. But while it wasn't strictly true, I came to see what he was getting at. When you use an approach to mental health that has no techniques and no tools and no practices for people to take away, then the health and understanding of the helper is paramount. In a way, the health of the practitioner becomes like a tuning fork to help the client or patient to experience the clarity and well-being for themselves. So if you talk about the three principles as an approach, and there are people who talk about it as an approach to mental health, an approach to high performance, an approach to spiritual fulfillment, it's always based on pointing people towards a deeper part of their mind where they are already mentally healthy, they're already in tune with their wisdom, they're already connected to spirit, connected to the deepest part of themselves, to the source of life, the life force. And one of the key determinants in how effective the pointing is the practitioner's connection with that deeper mind. So effectively, they give their clients a contact high while simultaneously pointing out that that source of mental clarity, the source of good feelings that they're experiencing is innate, and it's unconditional, and it's always available. And so the three principles as an approach is in fact the most powerful and impactful way I've found to alleviate suffering and to help people to be awesomer. But I'm also aware that for some people at some times, they might get a more immediate result by a different means. So when people talk about the three principles as the only real path to lasting mental health and happiness, I think it's missing the point. A wonderfully effective approach is by definition wonderful and effective, but it doesn't have to try to wear the mantle of the one and only path. So that takes us to another level that people talk about the three principles at, and that's the three principles as a model. So when I first started studying the principles, it drove me nuts that everybody kept insisting, it's not a model, it's true. So I've been a student of the structure of subjective experience for over 20 years. So I knew that the very fact that something is being described in language makes it a model. It's a linguistic representation of a universal reality or a subjective reality. So when we talk about mind, consciousness, and thought as the three principles underlying all human experience, we're using a model as a way of describing something which is fundamentally and observably true. In the same way as centrifugal force is a way of talking about the feeling of being pushed away from the center of a spinning wheel in a children's playground, even though it's not technically a real thing. Now, the value in a three principles model is it follows Einstein's dictum of being as simple as possible, but not simpler. So when we're trying to explain human nature, we're trying to explain the human experience, having a model which contains no inherent dogma or superstition is unbelievably valuable, because it lets people from every background, every religion, every creed, including agnostics and atheists, to take a fresh look at what's really going on behind the curtain of life. But it is a model. While the three principles aren't true at this level of description, having a conversation about them can be incredibly valuable. And it seems to give pretty much everybody access to a deeper, more profound experience of life without adding in a lot of ritual and belief into our already busy minds and full lives. Now, there's another level that sometimes people talk about the three principles at, and that's the three principles as the source of the human experience. So just because a model can't in and of itself be true doesn't mean that it can't be describing something that's true. So in English, we talk about gravity. And in Spanish, it's gravedad or la attraction universal, I think. And in French, la gravité. In Greek, varitata. Forgive me, anyone Spanish, French, or Greek in the world. But the force which keeps us from flying off into space as the Earth spins beneath our feet is observable regardless of what language you try to use to describe it. So sometimes you'll hear my colleagues talk about the three principles as three truths or as three spiritual facts. And in fact, what we're trying to do is what Alan Watts called F the ineffable. We're trying to point directly to the energy and intelligence behind life. So whatever it is that causes apple trees to bear apples, acorns to become oak trees, whatever it is that separates the living from the dead, is the invisible energy that runs through all things that we're pointing to when we use the word mind. And when we talk about consciousness, what we're trying to describe is what lets you hear my voice in your ear, what makes sense of the world in which you live, what it is that makes you, and me, me. So whatever that capacity is in the universe, which allows a thing to know itself at deeper and deeper levels, that's the thing we're pointing to when we use the word consciousness. And thought, which is both the simplest principle for most of us to recognize and the easiest one to get confused about, thought is just a way of talking about the universal translator, the capacity which allows us to create a million somethings from the single everything that our universe is made from. Thought creates our separate realities. It turns molehills into mountains, inspiration into invention. It allows the universe to be in relationship with itself. Now, when we talk about the three principles at the level of truth, trying to get the words right is like trying to point to fire with ice. The closer you get to the truth, the less you've got to work with. So, if we're going to speak about the three principles as the three fundamental elements behind all human experience, we have to follow the path of the mystical poet Rumi. We have to sell our cleverness and buy bewilderment. But there's a deeper feeling to the conversation at this level. I always think of it being like a wire becoming attuned to the electricity running through it, or a light bulb with an inner knowing of that which causes it to be lit from within. When we experience the principles at this level, we get less articulate, but we get more present. We get less intellectual, but we get more profound. So here's how I'd sum it up for myself. As an approach to mental health, high performance, and spiritual fulfillment, pointing to the truth behind our lives that the three principles model describes from the deepest place you can find inside yourself is the best way I've found to have a profound impact on others without losing yourself in the process. As a model, reducing the Googleplex of possible human experiences down to three fundamental elements which produce them all allows us to make sense of our lives without losing our bearings. And as a truth about life, the three principles are the spiritual essence and wisdom at our core, and they can be found in nearly every religion and spiritual teaching since the beginning of time. So I hope this prompts something in you, and what I'd love you to do is go to the Inside Out community on Facebook. If you're not already a member, you can apply, and will usually get you in within 24 hours. And just share your thoughts and reflections from today's podcast. So till next time, have fun, learn heaps, and I'll talk to you soon.